I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're delving into the Twilight, as Link is turned into his state-ordained persona, as we rank the bosses of the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. While not the hardest fights in the series, I've got amazing respect for the cinematic flair that comes with this more realistic take on Hyrule and its creatures. Every fight has an escalation, while also utilizing their relevant dungeon items to great success. We go the full gauntlet here, and I'm so excited to rank them. For the purposes of this video, the 3 Ganon fights at the end of the game are all going to be separate entries. Some people like to call Ganon's horseback portion its own 4th phase, but I think it plays into the whole battle with Dark Lord Ganondorf, so I feel comfortable putting those two together. If that makes sense, be sure to parry that subscribe button to stay up to date on all my future videos. I'll be doing a dungeon ranking of Twilight Princess next week, and let's jump right in. All 11 Twilight Princess bosses ranked. Let me know your favorite down below. At number 11, we have the Twilight Aquatic Morpheal, the boss of the Lakebed Temple. When you enter the boss arena and begin sinking downwards into this massive, expansive underwater room, it immediately puts you on edge. Fear of the unknown, fear of what lies below the depths, it's unnerving. Then you're met with some tentacles and a familiar gameplay loop, as we play Clawshot the Amoeba, similar to Morpha from Ocarina of Time. I can't explain why, but I really struggled with avoiding the tentacle grab attack in this first phase. I spent more time in Morpheal's mouth than I did playing the game. Everything felt so slow in phase 1, to my detriment. It takes forever to get enough damage on the boss to transition to phase 2, and I was hoping once Morpheal took to the room itself and began swimming that we'd have a more engaging fight on our hands. What ended up happening though was much the opposite. Morpheal will lazily swim around the room, sometimes coming within range of you so you can clawshot the eye on its back and begin hacking away at its weak point. Rinse and repeat until the boss is down. There aren't any smaller Morpheals to take aggro, there aren't any particularly dangerous attacks we have to worry about, and so long as we're swimming with the Zora armor, there's nothing Morpheal can do to stop our assault. It's disappointing, because no other boss in the game feels like it has as much missed potential as Morpheal. Underwater battles are hard to design, just look at Monster Hunter Tri on the Wii. But Twilight Princess was biting off more than they could chew here. The fact they haven't revisited this concept since says it all, really. At number 10, we have Puppet Zelda, the first boss of Hyrule Castle. With Ganondorf back at full strength, his first move is to Sleipnir by taking over Princess Zelda and forcing us to fight our own nation's ruler. Now, Ganondorf, if you really want to transition, there are better ways to do it than taking over Zelda's body. I'm just saying, there are some great surgeons in Castletown who will happily help you out. What this means is that we're stuck playing traditional Dead Man's Volley while I scream into the void because I'm so fucking sick of this specific type of Dead Man's Volley. At least Puppet Zelda has 2 other unique abilities that she can whip out to give this fight a tad bit of diversity, being the ability to dive at Link with her sword, as well as being able to summon a giant triangle of light that Link has to dodge away from. Ultimately though, the main way to defeat Puppet Zelda is to play energy tennis with her projectiles 3 times until she's defeated and the boss fight can progress to something actually interesting. It's the plot and the narrative that make Puppet Zelda cool, and the fact that it at least isn't a case of missed potential like Morpheal. Beyond her chilling, lifeless design, which befits one under someone else's control, I'll likely forget about this phase in the future playthrough. It's just not memorable to me, especially when what follows is one of the best parts of the fight. At number 9, we have the Twilight Igniter Fyrus, boss of the Goron Mines. When I was younger, Fyrus was always the boss who bottomed out on most countdowns and lists I read. He was too easy, his design was uninteresting, he felt like a step down after Diababa. But personally, I found Fyrus to be pretty fun on this playthrough. I think it's very clear that in order to stun the boss, you first need to fire an arrow at the glowing weak point at his head. We all figured that part out. However, all that leads to is Fyrus stumbling around until he regains his balance. What gives? Well, in order to actually trip the boss over, you need to then equip the iron boots, grab one of Fyrus's chains, and then pull yourself in the opposite direction of the boss. Do this, and Fyrus will trip over, allowing you to hack at his weak spot with your sword. It's the way that the boss encourages the use of both the dungeon item in the bow and the iron boots that you needed to reach this dungeon that tips Fyrus over the edge into 9th place. Now, is he still easy? Yes, undoubtedly the easiest boss in the game. But have you heard his boss theme? It's one of the best in the game, surely that has to count for something, right? At number 8, we have the Twilight Parasite Diababa, boss of the Forest Temple. The main reasoning I have for Diababa being above the bosses I've already talked about is pretty simple. For a first boss, I actually find Diababa relatively threatening. Phase 1 sees it using 2 Dekubaba heads to try and chomp up Link, with you needing to use the bomblings and your Gale Boomerang to get each head to swallow the bombs. Once both have been stunned, Phase 2 begins as the boss's true form emerges from the poison. Here, you have limited resources as the bomblings you were using are now gone, and instead you have to rely on your new monkey friend to boomerang bombs that he carries into the mouths of the boss. Having to keep track of your ally's position while also avoiding attacks from the 2 heads was surprisingly tough for me. Is it because I'm playing on Wii U and I find the gamepad so clunky whilst forgetting that it has gyroscopic aiming? Yes, but once you land those hits, it does feel very good in response. Once both heads are down, use one more bomb on the main boss, and you can now attack the main boss eye that falls to the ground. A simple affair, but one that has multiple phases and a lot more thought put into it than Fyrus or Morpheal from a gameplay perspective. At number 7, we have the Twilight Arachnid Armagoma, boss of the Temple of Time. This here is a biased pick because I have really bad arachnophobia. The gigantic eyeball on the back of the boss certainly helps take away some of the realism from the fight, but I just find myself wanting to throw the controller when I see those legs skittering across the roof. Gameplay-wise, the fight is super simple, a redux of Goma from Ocarina of Time with a slight difference. She'll still summon babies to attack you from the ceiling, but rather than come down to the floor to harass you, the boss will then attempt to fire at you with her giant laser eye. The challenge is to shoot the eye with an arrow before she can do this, knocking her down. Then you Dominion Rod the statue nearest the boss and use it to squish this bug into oblivion. It's a very traditional premise and does go a long way towards arachnophobia therapy by allowing us to crush the spider with the biggest hammer known to mankind, and then the fight rinses and repeats with faster lasers and more enemy spawns to distract you. I could see some people ranking Armagoma higher because it's a formulaic yet well-designed fight that takes direct use of its dungeon item in a very fun way. But I just hate spiders, I'm sorry, personal bias activated. The little post-fight chase with the skittering eye that tries to escape you while you hunt for your heart container though is very funny. A nice little gag to alleviate the tension. I respect it, Nintendo. At number 6, we have Dark Lord Ganondorf, the final boss of the game. Yeah, you heard me right. This fight likely would have ranked higher if it wasn't for the fact that the game considers the horseback segment in Hyrule Field to be part of the boss fight. Because for all intents and purposes, Ganondorf's sword duel is an extremely fun, if a little tedious, battle between our hero and villain. You get to use all your fun little moves you learned from the Howling statues, and maybe 2 of them will actually work. You can struggle against him in a clash of blades that leaves him wide open for an attack if you come out victorious, and he has a decent amount of danger to his own strikes. I do think Wind Waker's Ganondorf fight was more dangerous overall, I lost more hearts to it, but Dark Lord Ganondorf is still a fun time. And while I was lucky in this playthrough, able to blast through the horseback segment relatively quickly, that doesn't mean I'm letting it off the hook. Horseback battles are so fucking janky in Twilight Princess, they don't feel good to control, and you almost always overshoot or undershoot your mark. Combine this with needing to follow Ganondorf closely so the light arrows can strike him down, or how if you're hit even once, you go flying off your horse and need to get back on, while Ganondorf can freely continue to attack you with his phantom horseback minions, and you have a phase that feels tedious, unfun, and uninteresting. If I ranked the horseback phase as its own entry, it would be at the very bottom of this list, while the duel itself would be in the top 5. So both of them coming together to maximize their joint opposing slays keeps them at the very middle of the pack. I can't go on though without mentioning how Ganondorf in his death cutscene dies standing up. Man too angry to die on the floor, refusing to kneel even in his last moments when Zant snaps Ganondorf's neck. Zant, you know what? You ate that one thing. At number 5, we have Dark Beast Ganon, the second phase of the boss of Hyrule Castle. Here, Ganondorf decides to throw a hissy fit that he got kicked out of Zelda's body, turning himself into his classic boar form that we all know and love. Only in this game, we can do that too. Ganon will attempt to ram you down with a series of charge attacks that you need to halt in order to win. To do this, wait until Ganon has vanished into the twilight, then look around for portals that appear briefly. One of them will remain for a longer period of time, so you need to draw your bow and fire at the Dark Beast as he emerges. If you hit the crystal atop his forehead, he'll trip over and reveal his weak spot, allowing you to do damage. But halfway through the fight, Ganon will realize your strategy, instead jumping out of the portal so you can't strike him with the arrow. When he does this move, he'll eventually fall on top of Link, so be careful. Instead, you have to turn into a wolf and meet Ganon as he charges you from the portal, using your and Midna's powers to grab the beast and flip him over to continue damaging his weak spot. Given this is the final fight with Midna, the fact that we get to use Wolf Link one last time and have it be the clutch ability that allows us to take down Ganon in this form is enough for me to rank it as my favourite of this game's Ganon fights. I just really like Wolf Link, okay? At number 4, we have the Twilight Dragon, Argarok, the boss of the City in the Sky. You'd be surprised at how few Zelda games actually have you fighting dragons, least of all one as traditional as Argarok. But hey, there's always time for a cocktail, and there's always time for a dragon fight. The first phase of Argarok is pretty standard. You always start by double claw-shotting your way up the various pillars around the arena, with the aim being to target Argarok's tail. Once you've hooked on, equip the iron boots and watch the dragon fall. I love this method of attack as you've been using this technique to pull specific switches in the dungeon, so to have that same implementation in the boss fight is just really good game design. You do this until Argarok's darkened armor is completely stripped bare, upon which the storm gets rougher and the boss gets angrier. The rain causes a ring of peahats to spawn atop of the arena, which you have to then use after climbing the pillars to avoid Argarok's flame attacks. It feels super cool to outrun such a brazen series of flames with just your double claw shot and a dream. Then, while he's out of breath from his attack, you have to get behind him and slice away at his weak spot to ultimately win the fight. Argarok's all about using your environment and not slowing down for a second, as hesitation will mean defeat when this boss is trying to char you a nice medium rare. This was the best way to utilize the double claw shot, one of the more fun items in the series, and I still think the ring of peahats growing because of the rain is just genius environmental storytelling. At number 3, we have the Twilight Fossil Star-Lord, the boss of the Arbiter's Grounds. The clear fan favourite from Twilight Princess, I still firmly believe that Star-Lord is one of the best bosses in the game, and here's why. He's the only boss designed with the spinner in mind due to it being the dungeon item, and it's almost impossible to fuck up a Beyblade. You have to zoom into the center of the arena to slam against Star-Lord's spine, breaking it piece by piece. The challenges here come from the various Stal children that rise from the sands to block your assault, as well as the blade traps encircling the boss arena. I found them to be extremely oppressive and effective at shutting my ass down, but with enough persistence you will beat phase 1 quickly. Phase 2 is where I think the fight actually loses me a little bit. It is fun bouncing from wall to wall, avoiding fireballs, and ultimately slamming into the skull to stun it, thus doing damage. And I like the addition of the blade traps appearing as this phase goes on, forcing you to recall their locations so you can dodge effectively. But I found Phase 2 mostly consisted of waiting for 30 seconds until you're high enough on the walls for the boss to actually spawn, as you need a specific height to be able to complete his patterns. So a lot of time here is just spent waiting to actually do the fun parts. Like when you go up on a roller coaster, only it sometimes stops halfway because you mistime a dodge and a stray blade trap knocks you off instead of Stallard itself. I don't know, I feel rather than a vertical challenge, we could have gotten a Stallard Phase 2 that felt more like the skate park room you go through after getting the spinner. Something with more horizontal movement where it's about completing a tough spinner track to actually reach the boss's head. Still a great fight, I just feel it wasted my time a little bit in the second half. At number 2, we have the Twilight Ice Mass Blizzetta, the boss of the Snow Peak Ruins. You all knew she was gonna rank highly on this list, but I doubt anybody saw a top 2 finish coming for Yetta. The only boss in the game where we have a personal stake in the outcome, we've been trying to help Yetta and Yetto ever since arriving at the ruins, from creating a gorgeous cheesy soup to cleaning out the dangerous monsters in their backyard. So when Yetta finally shows us to the bedroom, the luster of the Mirror of Twilight is too much for her to handle and she snaps. The first phase is pretty simple, the ice mass will bounce around the room, and all you've got to do is ball and chain her until she shatters. Very simple, not that crazy. Then phase 2 starts, and we get the best boss music in the game, whilst introducing a genius little concept to the battle. Blizzetta will spawn a series of ice rocks that will follow the player, and the only way to see when they'll slam down is to use the icy reflection on the floor. It acts like a mirror, allowing you to see her as she floats above you. So you destroy an ice pillar, then when she attempts to slam you with a ring of ice followed by herself, simply run to where there's a break in the ring and then turn around and ball and chain her. Rinse and repeat until Blizzetta goes down. The ball and chain is a very rudimentary dungeon item, there's not a lot of use for it overall, but the way they make it work against Blizzetta is really entertaining, and the gimmick of using the ground to figure out safe spots is something I'm glad they took from Wind Waker's Puppet Ganon fight. Not to mention this has the cutest heart container reveal of the series, with it forming from the genuine love between the two Yetis, how saccharine and wholesome. At number 1, we have Usurper King Zant, the boss of the Palace of Twilight. One of the most polarizing villains in Zelda history, Zant starts off Twilight Princess as this unflinching dictator with an intimidation factor that I just haven't seen in Zelda up to this point. The way he appears after the Lakebed Temple is genuinely terrifying, with how he's able to cast aside the Light Spirit, wreck Link, and then threaten Midna in a totally not creepy way. It's clear he's a creature with a lascivious tongue and feels above everything. So when we find him in the Palace of Twilight, defeating everything that was thrown at us, having Zant snap and reveal the cowardly entitled persona beneath is, well, I'll let the player be the judge of that. Personally, I respect the plot twist, though I think one more cutscene with Zant between the Star-Lord fight and here wouldn't have gone amiss to bridge the gaps a tad. But the reveal here is that Zant isn't actually as powerful as he says. He's more of a magician, a man of illusions, and in his 6-stage boss fight that becomes perfectly clear, as his attacks almost always consist of that same magic orb barrage, just with different setups to introduce it. He'll take you on a greatest hits tour of some of the prior boss and mini-boss rooms, with you needing to use similar strategies from those fights against Zant. Phase 1, it's the Diababa boss room, so you use the boomerang on him to stun him and bring him to the shore. Phase 2, it's the Goron Mines mini-boss room, so you use the iron boots to stay rooted to the arena while he jumps until he gets tired. Phase 3, it's the Morpheal boss arena, so you use the claw shot on him when he reveals himself in his giant Zant head. Phase 4, you roll into logs that Zant is standing on, like the monkey mini-boss from the Forest Temple. And Phase 5 is a Blizzetta Redux, so get that ball and chain out, watch the floor, you know what to do. It's Phase 6 outside of Hyrule Castle Town where he ultimately is at his most dangerous, using various unhinged sword attacks to come out on top. Be they dangerous spins, slices, or teleports into combos, it's here where you'll either win the fight or die trying. But what I like is that for as unpredictable as Zant is trying to be, he ultimately is very predictable, not thinking through his combos, and he uses the same types of attacks to try and kill Link. It's clear that he is not a fighter. It leaves him open, vulnerable, and ultimately defeatable. Zant going from the more casual first 2 phases where he feels in control, to the last 2 phases where he's going big to try and defeat you, it tells a story. The story of a madman whose power is not enough to rule the land of Twilight. It all ends with Midna satisfyingly ripping into him in a rather gruesome death scene for a property like Zelda, and I just really enjoy that ending. Zant lands at number 1 because he tells a story with his boss fight, and it's a rare greatest hits style boss done correctly, as he majors in illusions and is trying to use Link's memories to his advantage. Whether he's a good villain or not, as said, I'll leave that up to the comments, but I firmly believe he is so much better than people give him credit for. And that's my list. Which Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess boss is your favourite, and why is it likely Star-Lord? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. Next up, Twilight Princess's dungeons will get ranked, so that's going to be a lot of fun. I want to give a shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing, thank you so much. You get a shout out in the description, at the end of videos, on screen right now, and you get access to special videos, special secret little Let's Plays. Ooh, it's so much fun. If you want to join, it's $4.99 a month, and yeah, if you want to follow me, check me out on Blue Sky. That's where you want to go and take a little look, and I'll see you next time for another video. Adios.